Thank you, Mr President. My question, without notice, is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Abbott. And I ask, is the Prime Minister aware that the Iraqi government of Nouri al-Maliki is fighting alongside Shia militias accused of ethnic cleansing, beheadings and death squads against the Sunnis in the fight against the Islamic State, which is committing the same gruesome crimes against the Shias? If so, what guarantee can you provide? If so, what guarantee can you provide that the weapons Australia is delivering into northern Iraq won't end up in the hands of Shia militias and be turned on the new Iraqi government if it is a unity government including Sunnis?
The Leader of the Government in the Senate, representing the Prime Minister, Senator Abbott.
Mr President, regrettably, day after day we get questions from the Leader of the Australian Greens basically saying that Australia should not be part and parcel of the deal that has been done by democratic, peace-loving countries, now even endorsed by the Secretary-General of the United Nations. It really beggars belief why the Leader of the Greens would come into this place and ask the sort of questions that she has.
Point of order, Senator Milne.
Mr President, I would ask the Minister to answer the question, not engage in a rhetorical attack.
Order on my right. Senator Milne, the Minister has not even completed a quarter of his answer. So, Minister, you have the call.
I do find it a bit strange that the honourable senator should complain about rhetorical attacks, really. But look, setting that aside, the reality is that the world is facing a gruesome situation in Iraq. And sometimes when you are faced with those circumstances, very, very tough decisions need to be made. And I can accept Senator Di Natale's interjection and put it on the record that our involvement could make it worse. Well, that's a possibility, but the Secretary-General of the United Nations doesn't agree with you, the United States doesn't agree with you, the United Kingdom doesn't, France doesn't, Italy doesn't, and the European Union doesn't, and so the list goes on. So it begs the question, what would the Australian Greens do? They would say, don't be involved at all. Don't provide the wherewithal for minority ethnic groupings, minority religious groupings to be able to protect themselves from the barbarity of ISIL. We as a government will do all we can in lockstep with the international community to protect these minorities from what would otherwise be
Minister.
an
the time for
absolute
answering
slaughter.
The question has expired. Senator Milne, a supplementary question.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. Will the Minister detail the direct contact the Prime Minister has had with the Iraqi government to date and say whether Australia has exerted diplomatic pressure to ensure that it will be inclusive of Sunnis and other minorities in the new government of Dr al-Abadi, or are we leaving that to the United States?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Look, of course, I am not going to indicate to the Australian Greens or indeed anybody else the direct contact that may or may not have been held in these very difficult circumstances where it may well stand to reason that logistical and operational matters may have been discussed. Of course, we are not going to divulge anything of that nature. But I think what the Australian people can be absolutely assured of is that, one, the Australian government, and if I might say especially through the leadership of our Prime Minister, has shown international leadership in relation to this issue, and we have seen support from diverse administrations from the United States, the United Kingdom and the other countries I previously mentioned, saying this is the right thing to do. What's more, supported by the European Union and the United Nations.
Thank
it
you,
seems
Minister.
the only one not
time
supportive
for answering the
is the Australian Greens.
Senator Milne, a final supplementary question.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. And I wasn't asking for operational details. I was asking what direct contact the Prime Minister's had with the Iraqi government. And I ask now, what contact have we had with the Turkish government regarding sealing its borders to prevent the movement of jihadists through Turkey to Syria? Have we had direct contact with them?
Minister.
That nearly sounds like a question about border protection for Turkey, but we won't get into border protection with this one. Can I simply indicate to the Australian Greens that when we are dealing with sensitive issues such as this, it behoves all of us to put the national and indeed the international interests of people first. And when you've got the Australian Labor Party taking a bipartisan approach, the United Nations, the European Union and a smattering of democratic, peace-loving countries all on board, one wonders in what parallel universe the Australian Greens are actually residing. It really is very disappointing that we've got a cohort of senators in this place that for once cannot put politics aside on such a very important issue when all the other senators and parties
Thank you,
in this
Minister.
place
The time
can.
for answering the question has expired.